I did really want to briefly touch upon some of the stuff that happened today and talk about it in relation to the eclipses. Now, we're not going to get too deep into it because I still haven't done some of the research like that I want, but I did want to just bring it up because it did happen today and we are in the Eclipse Trigger Portal. So we have here the chart for June 6th, 2011. I don't know what time this came out. I'm assuming it was like 9. We don't really have to know what the time is. We can read from the moon. This is the chart of when Twitch came out. My co-host is so beautiful. I know. Thank you for being here. The number one thing you want to look at is the moon. So right away, we see moon is in 20 degrees Cancer, and this is Ashlesha Nakshatra, Pada 2. Now, obviously, we don't know if this is the exact time, but the reality is it was in Ashlesha all day long. So we can say pretty confidently that Twitch is Ashlesha moon. Now, what does that mean? Ashlesha is the star of the serpent, the star of the Nagas. I'm Ashlesha ascendant, so I know a lot about Ashlesha. Ashlesha is the clinging star. Moon in Ashlesha learns to embrace life and its challenges by knowing its weakness and dealing with them using their intellect. The power of Ashlesha is the power to inflict poison and destroy the victim. This is like about like the power of poison to destroy enemies, but also to be the cure. If you want to cure a snake bite, you have to have the antivenom, and in order to have the antivenom, you have to actually use some of the venom in the antivenom, right? So it's the poison and the cure. But really, we see that it means the embracing the entwiner. So what does all this mean? Ashlesha is very strongly connected with the powers of hypnosis. To have Twitch be Ashlesha moon, we're seeing that this is about, at its core, being able to literally entertain people, as in capture their attention and sort of hypnotize them into being in another experience, because that is ultimately what the power of the serpent is. And obviously that power can be used for good or for ill. And obviously everyone on Twitch is a different personality, but Twitch itself is a vehicle for people being able to be brought into these other channels, these other realities that people are creating. The reason why this is important is because of something else that I found in my research. I then was like, okay, that's really interesting. I want to delve more into this Ashlesha moon. If it did come out around 9 a.m., that would also make it Cancer ascendant, which is really intrinsic in its identity as a whole. It also would mean that moon is the ruling planet. So it would be very significant if it was also Cancer ascendant. We just don't exactly know that for sure, but I think it's a pretty strong possibility. So I was like, okay, I want to look up Twitch. Let's get into the history here. Founding and growth. In June 2011, the company decided to spin off the gaming content as Twitch TV, inspired by the term Twitch gameplay. This is really, really important. I realized today. Today was one of those days where I was like, I can't believe I didn't look this up until now. I was having a moment. Twitch gameplay is a type of video gameplay scenario that tests a player's response time. Action games such as shooters, sports, multiplayer online battle arena, and fighting games often contain elements of Twitch gameplay. For example, first-person shooters such as Counter-Strike and Call of Duty require quick reaction times for the players to shoot enemies, and fighting games such as Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat require quick reaction times to attack or counter an opponent. Other video game genres may also involve Twitch gameplay. For example, the puzzle video game Tetris gradually speeds up as the player makes progress. This was so interesting to me because it reminded me of something that my astrologer told me years ago. The serpent energy is very ambitious, but what it needs to understand and learn, or for you anyway, he was talking about me in relation to this energy. He's like, you need to become deeply in the meditative state. when you get into that deeply meditative state and cultivate this relationship with the unknown, you will then inherently know when to strike. And you see that in like the Cobra. They're like, this, but they know exactly when they need to like strike, counter strike, first person shooter, quick reaction time, response time. This is exactly what this higher, deeper, but also like subconscious meaning of what Twitch is, like at the core of its own name and its chart, is about focusing on how do people respond or react. And of course, we're seeing it through the paradigm of a game, but the reality is this entire reality is the game. And so the lesson of Twitch is, are we going to become aware enough to translate this from a superficial gaming paradigm to our own lives, and in a way that we can strive to become more empowered in our lives to respond in the appropriate way at the appropriate time, so that we can strike things in our lives when we need to strike them and wait when we need to wait, and not get all messed up by trying to be, overly ambitious or unnecessarily self-sacrificing or anything like that. You think about what can happen in these games. Now, obviously I knew Twitch was owned by Amazon, but I didn't really realize when this happened. On August 25th, 2014, Amazon acquired Twitch for $970 million in an all-cash deal. So August 25th, 2014, I actually know exactly where I was and what I was doing and what happened to me on that day. It was actually a very traumatizing day in my life, and it changed my life forever. And it ultimately led to my Kundalini awakening that happened about 2 weeks after this. But on a more macro level, this was around the exact same time that we saw Gamergate happen. So Gamergate, obviously, I'm not going to get into the whole Gamergate thing, but like the reason why I bring it up is because this is on a energetic level, we have two very significant events occurring in relation to the concept of games and gamers and gaming culture happen at this time frame. And so it's just going to be important then to understand what was going on. August 2014, Monday. We have Jupiter, Venus, both in Cancer, Venus being in Australasia, Jupiter being exalted in Cancer. Yeah, Alushua. Oh, wow. I just looked up what happened on that day for me and it was not a good day. Yeah, it was a bad day. It was actually one of the worst days of my entire life. There were primal screams. It was bad. Learn more on my YouTube channel. This had a really insane conjunction of Mars and Saturn, exact conjunction of Mars and Saturn. This can be a very intense conjunction because it has to do with fanaticism. So to have it here happening in Vishaka, which is a star associated with sudden splits in the forks in the road. So a lot of people were probably going through extreme events where like their lives had a very sudden shocking event that happened that like changed the course of their life kind of thing. That's what my experience was. Obviously your mileage may vary, but in this case, we're seeing how Twitch had this moment where its destiny went in a totally different direction because it was acquired by, the most richest company on earth and became absorbed into it basically. And the reason why we see that is because we have Jupiter exalted, and Jupiter expands everything that it touches. And to have Jupiter exalted in the ascendant, presumably, or in the moon, it's going to be expanding things vastly. We also have Sun and Moon in Maga, Leo, which has to do with royalty and the kings. Donald Trump has his ascendant here, I'm pretty sure, and literally his whole slogan is MAGA. It's very literal sometimes. So this is like a kind of a sign of like how the patriarchy can absorb a thing in a way. And we had really intense eclipse here in 2017. So we see here how this day is actually really deeply connected. And I know this from my personal experience, so it's not really that I'm reading into it from this, but in my own personal experience, I know that this day is deeply connected to the August 2017 total solar eclipse over America, and because it happened here in Maga Nakshatra, so this energy was activated. Again, I'm still doing research on all of this. There is more that has happened with Twitch. Like obviously 2014 to present is like the current era. Here we have August 2017, Twitch announced that it had acquired video indexing platform Clipmine. I don't really know much about this. Yeah, this is literally around the eclipse. They know that their discovery is bad, so I guess they were trying to like figure out how to improve upon that. Obviously, we have a whole saga of things that are happening here. March 2023, Dan Clancy became CEO of Twitch. And on March 20th, Clancy announced that Twitch would be laying off 400 employees. We were not really fully in the eclipse season yet, but we were like moving towards it because it started in mid-April of last year. So this was kind of like the pregame to a lot of that eclipse story. That leads us to now. In January 2024, Twitch announced another mass layoff affecting 500 employees or 35% of total staff after previous layoffs in early 2023. The announcement came amid ongoing struggles and ensuing layoffs across the tech and environmental sectors. So this is the Twitch birth chart. Something to really pay attention to is this is where Twitch's Saturn is. Saturn retrograde. 16 degrees Virgo, Hasta. Again, remember, Hasta is the hand. Even if we discount the fact that we could possibly have Cancer ascendant, we read from the moon. So we have moon as the first house. We have moon as the ascendant. That means that Saturn rules the 7th house and the 8th house of Twitch. 7th house is relationships, all relationships, because 1st house is you, 7th house is relationships. So that makes Saturn is the 7th lord. 7th lord goes into the 3rd house of communications. Automatically you're set up to have all your relationships be related to communications technologies. So Twitch, all of this is about the streamers on Twitch being related to, being communicators, basically multimedia messengers. Now, if we have the 7th lord, the planet that's in charge of the 7th house of all relationships, of all of Twitch's streamers being here in Virgo, and we have Ketu, the south node right here now in Virgo as of November, that means that Ketu, the south node, is going to be going closer and closer and closer to where this Saturn at 16 degrees Virgo is. Like right now, if we look at the chart for right now, Ketu is here. Ketu is the south node. It's going over it. Right now it's at 23 degrees, but it moves retrograde. So it's going to be going over this later this year. And Ketu is severance, slicing and dicing, right? It cuts things out to spiritualize them. So what are we seeing as soon as Ketu is coming in here and it's hitting the 7th lord, where the 7th lord is, which is all relationships? We're talking about severance of relationships with streamers on Twitch, severance of employees of Twitch. Now, we already had that start to go down last year in the lead up to all of this because we were starting to fall under the influence of what this new situation would be. Also, we had Ketu in Libra, which is also about relationships. So there was a lot of that going on. But to have it be approaching this is like really, really significant because it's talking about how there's just going to be a lot of changing of the guard at Twitch in terms of streamers on Twitch, what types of people are going to be on Twitch, employees of Twitch, and all that kind of thing, because there is a purification that's happening here. Also, 8th house, Saturn is the 8th lord from the moon. So that also means that this is talking about other people's money. The reason why all these layoffs are happening is because they don't have as much money from Amazon to pay for them anymore. They don't have as much money to keep Pokimane here, presumably, is why she's leaving, because she's getting a better deal from some place like maybe YouTube or whatever. Literally in the middle of a severance and purification on one of my first Twitch communities right now. See, I'm telling you, it's going to be happening across all of Twitch. And the thing is, Ketu is like a spiritual agent. So like for me, I'm coming in here during this time because I'm representing a Ketu energy. Like I have Ketu in the 1st house in Ashleisha, actually. So I'm kind of like a Ketu type person. It's not lost on me that I'm like coming in here at this time, like, hello, hello, hello. Everything's like getting up around the area. I know that I'm here to be a part of like a spiritualization process in whatever way that's meant to happen here. I don't really know what that's going to look like. This is like an experiment for me, but I'm sort of like a K2 person who's like coming in here as a part of things being shaken up The positive side of that is like spiritual downloads, coming into some interesting past life understanding and all this kind of stuff. Like K2 can be very opening in that way, but it usually happens through an ego death because K2 is the headless body of the serpent. So it's kind of like decapitated. That's why it's very cutting, because it's like it doesn't have a head. Rahu is the head, and Rahu is up here. Interestingly, that's where Twitch's Uranus is. So that's a whole other story, which we'll get to later, I guess, when I do more research on that. This is the kind of thing that we're going to be talking about on the stream. My passion for Vedic astrology runs deep, as many of you know. I find it to be a very, very deep and accurate science by which we can really observe really fascinating patterns and go deep in understanding, you know, what these patterns can mean. And I think that ultimately it's going to be good for Twitch. I think that a big part of the stream is going to be like, you know, interesting research that we can do on what's going on right now so we can better understand the greater astrological and energetic context and how we can then use that to our advantage in seeing the zeitgeist, basically. Like the zeitgeist is the spirit of the times. When you understand what the spirit of the times are, you can really know how to orient your own life around it. And I think a huge part of this is going to be about the power of community. That was like the biggest theme that came through in my 2024 energy forecast stream. Yeah, I think that because so many people are getting laid off, the power of community is going to be even more important because people are going to need support while they try to find, you know, new jobs or figure out what they want to do with their life. Like maybe this is a wake up call for some people that they never should have been working in tech. You know, I think a lot of people in our generation, like millennial and Gen Z, especially generation, there was a huge emphasis put on STEM. Everyone was like, oh, you can make money in the jobs and whatever. But I do think that it maybe like artificially inflated like what people should have been doing, you know, and now it's kind of like, okay, maybe certain people are having a bit of a new realization around what they actually really want to do, because a lot of times we have to have things that we thought we wanted taken from us to reevaluate our lives and know what we should really be doing, or at least go down that self-discovery path. But obviously capitalism is going to capitalism, and we really need to make sure that we cultivate strong communities so that we can all support and take care of one another, even if they're online. Because even though people might think that that's not as good as in-person communities, it's really not about comparing those two things. It's really about having both, because I think it's really valuable to have connections with people all over the world and to be able to have there be people who you can count on for emotional support if you don't have that in your IRL life. There's a lot of power in galvanizing communities online, and you can really start to affect a lot of change when you can get everyone on the same page. I'm looking forward to growing my community on here. I don't even really want to say like my community, because like it's really not about me. Like I'm just here to like do the thing that I'm here to do, and the community is really for everyone's benefit, because that's the entire point. I have escaped too many cults in my life to ever have my stream or this thing I'm creating become too much about me. Like obviously it's somewhat about me, and I have to make it somewhat about me because that's so much of my life experience is at play here. But Alushua, so what you're saying is you know how to do a cult. I will say that I have seen how people create cults because I have been in them by accident, and then I had to leave them because I realized that they were cults, and I had to deprogram like my own mind. And we're all in a cult though. Like that's the thing. Like people who end up in stuff like Scientology, they don't go out saying to themselves like, I want to be in a cult. Like the reality is every single person who lives in the United States of America was born into a cult, or who was born here. This country is a cult. And we've never seen that more clearly by having Donald Trump be president, because he's like a cult leader, you know. There's levels to this game. America's a cult, and then you see lots of cults happen around the Fox News thing. They use a lot of like neuro-linguistic programming, like NLP, and they use tones to entrain people's nervous systems to get them to be addicted. and to have their nervous systems be calibrated to their fear-based programming. So that's a cult. All the mainstream media is basically a cult. Aside from all of that, like in my life that I've escaped, like growing up in a Fox News home and being born in America and stuff, like I include that in the cults that I have been deprogramming from. I have also experienced a corrupt plant medicine shaman, a corrupt guru. You could argue that a certain person I was involved with, like in Hollywood, who I will not name, but who I have named publicly, had that quality about him because he created a cult TV show. It's a fine line between culture and a cult. And the difference between the two, in my opinion, is a culture is founded upon shared values, and the art and architecture and language and society that reflects those values. And a cult is founded upon one or more individuals' egos, which is not really the truth, because the ego is a construct that is here to not be the thing in charge. We can see things like the royal family. That's a cult. North Korea. That's also a cult. You know, like there are things that are very obvious, but then there are things that are a little bit less obvious because, you know, it's easy for us to see that when we're not born in it and we don't think it's normal. It's easier for Americans to be like, that's so weird that they have a king and blah, blah. It's like, yeah, well, the whole point of America was to escape that. But then we never did shadow work around it collectively. So we ended up just repeating it because we just wanted to, the founding fathers just wanted to have those same privileges, but just to create different excuses to why they had them. We all have to deprogram. And ultimately, that's what it all comes back down to, is what I was talking about with the snake energy and Twitch gameplay is a type of video gameplay that tests a player's response time. They require quick reaction times for players to shoot enemies and fighting games, such as Street Fighter. Ashlesha is all about defeating the enemy, like I was saying. Being able to basically have your nervous system response, your ability to respond to your environment, your responsibility, your power, essentially, be your own and not owned by somebody else because they've programmed you by entrainment and hypnosis. I literally spent my entire life marinating in a lot of television programming and then going to film school and majoring in writing for screen and television, and then working for many, many years in television. And I've understood on a deep level, like, how television is, it can be amazing art. Don't get me wrong. I love it. Like when you can be invited into a world that you can experience through your emotional body and go through the story and like feel and learn and have that cathartic experience with something like so powerful. It's really rewarding and amazing, but it's very dangerous in the wrong hands. And that is why I think so much of this, you know, detoxing has to happen here. Because if we're going to deprogram, we have to detox the programmers. We have to detox the programming. So that's my insight around that. My whole purpose of this stream is, and like my channel in general, is that I really want to inspire people to be empowered in their lives. And the last thing I ever want to do is like cultivate like any kind of dependence on me. I just consider myself to be like a spiritual catalyst and like here to just offer my perspective and my insight. But everyone here is going to do what they need to do with that. Like, you can tune in for one stream and never come back. Cool. You can tune in for all the streams and become part of the community. Great. Like, I'm happy to have you. Like, you can be here for as long as you want and you're free to leave whenever you want, because this is not a cult. We're not doing that here. The things I have escaped. It really is important to me that I not fall into the trappings that I've seen other people fall into who were otherwise very, very spiritually talented people who drank too much of their own Kool-Aid. And you hate to see it. The lesson that I've had to learn time and time again, repeatedly, that I really hope that I'm over learning now is because I'm over it, is just because someone is tapped in or talented, which is the same thing, doesn't mean that they're in their integrity. And I had to learn this the hard way, like at least like 5 different times, you guys. Like it was so annoying. I'm the last person to say that I don't have an ego. I will always admit when my ego is triggered or that I'm having a moment because because I think it's just important that we don't demonize that, because we have egos for a reason. It's just, it only becomes a problem when we like let that shit go run amok, you know? Like our egos serve a purpose. Our egos are here to help us have an experience of individuality in this dimension. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to have an individuality. We would just be the amorphous blob of the universe. And we are that still, but we have to have this experience. Now, all the cults I was accidentally a part of were never advertised as a group of that. Well, actually, there was one that had a website, but it's fine. I think a lot of people have had a huge fascination about, like, as a part of like the true crime obsession that people have been having, like in our culture, a huge part of that has been an interest in cults. And I think it's because on a subconscious level, everyone is aware that nothing is really as it seems and that everything is kind of fucked up, but they haven't yet really connected to the dots as to the fact that everyone's in a cult. But they have become aware of the fact that these cults exist. And it's just like, we just have to connect these dots. Like, you guys are so close. Like, everyone who says, I would never let myself, it's like, yeah, because you haven't done shadow work around the fact that you are susceptible to a cult. So you are voting in these elections. Cult. I mean, you can make the argument that they have an effect on a local level, but if we're talking like presidential election, that's all of us agreeing to give our power to a fake government. It's totally made up. I'll talk another stream about the experiences that I've had that have shown me about the fall of America and how we're in like the total collapse of like the American empire and all that stuff. Anyway, the eclipses are going to be 3rd house, 9th house. 3rd house is all about communications technologies, media, multimedia messaging. Also 7th Lord being all of like the Twitch streamers, communities, and relationships in Twitch. So it's going to be going through a huge detox and like a lot of like severance cutting or whatever, but also like at the same time as spiritualization. And I do see myself coming in as a part of that spiritualization. And the 9th house is like higher education, religious institutions, the father as well. I'm trying to think of how that would apply to Twitch as a company. Maybe like the philosophy of the company. Like we have Dan Clancy as this new CEO who's still pretty new. It's been less than a year. I do wonder if a part of this calling of like all the people on Twitch is going to have like a kind of recalibration of like what their whole company philosophy is all about. So that'll be interesting to see what comes with that.